Welcome back, and thanks again to our lunch partners, Nash Tech. So this is obviously the new group for this breakout session, and the first session will be sweat, stats and recovery. And I'd like to introduce Lukas Bower, who is the partner in technology consulting at EY and is well known to many of you in the InsurtechLIVE ecosystem. Thanks, Lukas.
Are we sitting here or are we sitting?
Good afternoon,
Out
everyone.
there.
Try to keep the energy up after lunch. I know you're probably ready for a nap. On that front, we've got some really exciting panelists with us today, and I'll let them come up and introduce themselves. And I think, who's first up on the PowerPoints? Is that Kenneth? Yeah, Kenneth.
Thank you everyone for the opportunity to speak today. What I'm going to do is just very briefly give you a bit of an overview about EO. We're a sports tech company. So basically, EO is a sports tech company. We have 4 primary focuses in the way we operate. We are about improving performance. We're about accelerating recovery and adaptation of athletes, preventing injury and aiding rehabilitation. So our focus is very broad. Our aim is to look for gaps in what's happening in sport. I had 30 years working at the New South Wales Institute of Sport, 16 as their principal scientist, where the role was to look at what would sport look like in 4 to 5 years' time and what was going to be needed then to help the athletes basically perform at Olympic Games. We've been involved for 3 years in developing a range of products: Swim Better, which is predominantly a performance device; Polar Cap, a head cooling device which has been shown to be effective in reducing severity and duration of concussion injuries. And then new products coming through, Sweat Test to look at sweat rate composition, both in sport, but we've had interest from industry and military, and looking at it both from performance and health. Neurotrack, which is a concussion detection system looking at EEG function of the brain, and an Exaflex, which is an ankle brace which is designed to be knitted in 3 dimensions and uses a range of carbon structures to both control, allow and restrict ankle movement. I suppose the biggest things for me in the last few years of working in this space, both in sport, is really looking at what have we learned. And in sport we talk about Sidious, Altius, Fortius from the Olympic Games, faster, higher, stronger. Moore's Law, which is in the technology space, is about smaller, faster, cheaper, and add in low power. And so we see this continuing evolution of tech and its application to wider and wider populations. As I said, we initially target looking at high performance athletes, but all our products are designed to then scale out into the wider community. Our focus is to look at high quality underpinning science and engineering, and that helps make it scalable. So the sweat device, which is being developed in sport, has interest from US military and also from industry in terms of work health and safety aspects. We maximise the use of our expert networks, and that is both domestically and internationally. We seek out the best people, university, industry, sport, wherever we can get the information we require. And to paraphrase some earlier work from Raindrop in the previous presentation, we have gone into use of curated AI models where we use peer-reviewed journal articles as the basis of developing the AI model, and then we use industry experts, be they coaches, scientists, to check the output of the AI model in order to maximise the benefit, reduce the time, and ensure that we have an effective AI process. So that's a very brief overview of EO. I'm going to now hand over to Gretchen.
Excellent. Thanks, Kenneth. As someone with an exercise science background, I could listen to these developments all day long and really enjoy it, so thank you. My name's Gretchen Masters. I lead the People Risk Advisory function at Marsh Benefits, where we basically work with organisations to help to mitigate their people risk, largely within the context of people risk insurances, so life insurances, health insurances, workers' compensation. What I wanted to do today is just show a very small slice of what we see relating to the data and a couple of case studies that we have. So we'll see if I have better luck with the clicker. There we go. So this data here is from our Health on Demand report, where we seek opinion from over 17,000 employees globally, and it's really assessing the health and the benefits landscape. There's a lot of detail there. We could spend the rest of the slot just talking about it, but if we look at it incredibly simplistically, once you break your employee population into different workforce segments, no matter how you cut it, you can see that there's still a really overwhelming demand for digital support. They're looking for digital support for their health, their well-being, and to reduce risk and support themselves and their families. So those purple boxes there really, really show that the demand for digital is high. So one of the ways that we are meeting that demand within our clients in Australia is Physio, which is basically a digital physio tool. So if you think you injure yourself, you go to the physio, that initial consultation, it's reasonably predictable. You go through a series of questions, you go through a screening piece, and then the physio will end up telling you what needs to happen next. So Physio digitizes this experience and uses workflows to make smart, informed recommendations on the next best step for you as an individual. This could mean you're recommended to go straight to emergency. It could be go to your GP. It could mean that you need to go and see a physio face-to-face. Or around about 40% of users will go into the digital self-management platform within Physio, so they'll be suitable for the digital care pathway, which is delivered via an app, but supported by clinicians in the back end. This is really new to Australia, but in the UK, what we saw is that it's incredibly popular with insurers because it's affordable and scalable, but it's also really optimising that patient care experience because they're getting much faster access to the appropriate care pathway. So it's a good example of what we see on the rise within Australia. This is another slightly different example that I wanted to share. It's from one of our large manufacturing clients. So they're a large national client, and they were seeing increases in claims for body stressing injuries, so increases in workers' compensation claims. And they knew that they could look at changing insurers and kind of play the game to find ways around this, but what they really needed to do was care for their workforce. So the option that we put in front of them came straight from the sporting arena. It was a force plate-based tool that had been used with professional sports teams in Australia and in the States. And what happens is individuals jump onto this force plate, stand on it on one leg and do a few jumps. They're taken through a series of movements that takes less than 5 minutes. And then that predicts their risk of injury based on their stability and their power. From there, they get recommended personalised exercise programs to reduce their risk of injury. And then we brought in the human component because what we know is that technology on its own will only go so far. So we had a clinician there on site to help people go, okay, here's your exercise plan. You tell me a little bit about your life, and then we'll figure out how to fit this exercise plan into your life and make sure that you can really take these results and take them further so that you see the benefits. And with that client, I won't talk you through all of the outcomes, but the very short version is there was a significant improvement in movement health. There was the reduced risk of injury, and there was also a huge uptick in employee sentiment. So we saw that people were really appreciating the sentiment from the employer as well as benefiting from that reduction in risk. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Jenny.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Jenny Legge. I'm the founder and CEO of Staunch Technology. We have an online platform called the Job Fit System that matches worker abilities to job demands to reduce the number and costs of workplace injuries. It's built on the scientifically validated pre-employment functional assessments, which is what I did as part of my PhD research in the predictive validity of functional testing. And then coupled with that, We use internationally accepted and validated ergonomic risk assessment tools. We combine the two to find out where the matches and mismatches are to help to identify workers at risk, increased risk of injury, and then how we can reduce that risk to obviously prevent the injuries. Now, in the event that an injury still occurs, also in our system we have the brand new Return to Work module. It was a recent winner of the DXC Invitational in the workers' comp category. Essentially what it does is it uses those same technologies, brings them together to automate the suitable duties plan. They can also then get all the approvals done online and electronically. So essentially you can have an approved return to work plan before that injured worker has even got back to their car. So more objectivity, fairer, faster, resulting in better outcomes. So essentially it's reducing the effort and improving communication. That means a better experience for everybody involved, which is therefore then less secondary psych claims. And of course, the ultimate outcome being that reducing return to work costs and getting people back into the workforce a lot sooner. If you want to find out any more, you're welcome to scan the code and I can talk with you later. But I'll get straight onto the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Esteemed panelists, and welcome. Very diverse group here sitting with me. Looking out in the exhibit hall, hearing the pitches this morning, we see a lot of great ideas, which are really, really exciting. But I've got a question for you, Gretchen. It's one thing to have a great idea, but how do you get a corporate to actually adopt it? What strategies have you succeeded in using?
It's a very topical question. We just had a product shortlisted for an insurer's innovation pitch, and we found out this morning that it was shortlisted, and their first question was, can you send through some evidence on this, local evidence on this? So everyone wants to be first, but no one actually wants to be first. So what you really need to do is take the time to talk through the methodology behind the why something was built. You know, if you build something well and you create it based on clinical evidence, human behaviours, real observations, and that engagement, whether that's with employees or with the broader population, then you will be able to stand up the solution. So it's about bringing people on the journey as to how you ended up in this product innovation in the first place.
Thank you. Jenny, following on from that question, what blockers have you needed to navigate when you've been trying to get employers and insurers to adopt things?
There's been a variety. I think one of the main things is that people think that implementing a technology is just a simple implement a technology plan, whereas it really is a change management process. They're bringing in this new technology not to replace another technology. They're bringing it in to improve a process. So you really need to get to the bottom of what's the problem that they're trying to solve. What do they feel the outcome should be? And you use words like feel and look because I really want them to get some emotion behind it. You know, how do you think this will feel when it's successful, or what will a day look like when it's successful? But I think one of the really good questions to ask before you start on any of those to identify what the blockers are is why now and why not last year?
Thank you, Jenny. Kenneth, how do we measure effectiveness? You're a scientist, an expert. How do you balance things like business objectives, efficiency, cost reduction with reliability and safety?
The good thing is the business side I leave to my CEO. As the scientist, my role is really to look at the effectiveness of the product and bring that back to the team. So we use objective measurements. You know, we aim to quantify it either in field or in terms of the equipment, checking the equipment is working accurately using very simple basic measurements. So like the pressure sensors that we use in our swimming device, we can lower it into a swimming pool. We know for every metre of depth, there's an increase in pressure. So we can use very simple measures very easily to check accuracy, reliability of equipment. And, you know, and that's important for us when we give that to an athlete and to a coach to say, we know this device works properly, here is the evidence, and we can give it in a simple form that the person can understand and take home.
Thank you.
Can I jump in and add a little bit to that one from an engaging with humans point of view? Because when you're trying to deliver something to the workforce, it can be quite challenging. And so we really work to simplify the metrics. We go, firstly, did people use it? And ideally, there would be an engagement target set that you're trying to achieve. And if it's in the preventative space, it's really important to think about who your target audience is. It's probably not your entire workforce or your entire insured population. Who's the real target? And then set an engagement metric based on that. So do people use it? Then second category of metrics should all relate to, does it do the thing it said it's going to do? So if it's reducing risk of injury, do injuries actually reduce? And then the third really important one is to measure sentiment too. Do people like it? Do they appreciate you more as an insurer because you offer it? Even if they don't use it, do they appreciate you more as an insurer because it's available? And we find those three categories of metrics can apply to any product innovation and any implementation, and they're really quite powerful and quite meaningful. And I guess the other thing I'd say is that in the workforce space, the challenge is that often people don't have the capacity or the skills to do this well, and that's where sometimes it's worth outsourcing your vendor management. You know, if you're not going to do it well, it's a very expensive mistake to make, so it can make a lot of sense to outsource that and have someone else bring the rigour and the governance to the metrics if you can't do it yourself.
And I'd add another level to that, and I like this that we come from different, perspectives. So when you're looking at work-related assessments, so we're talking about technology, but essentially it is to provide a work-related assessment or a work-related service. And so there's 5 things you need to consider. There's safety, reliability, validity, practicality, and utility. And all 5 of those things are important, but they're important in different sequence to everybody. And so it's really good when you start to engage with a new employer to go through those 5 attributes and find out what's most important to them. And what's most important to the safety person is probably very different to the health person or the HR person or the operations person. And so it's really good to understand what values most to them and let them know that you're not going to meet the needs of everybody in the same way. I think it's important to set up at the start.
Thank you. Great perspectives. I'm going to jump around a little bit, and I'm going to mention a word that will strike terror into the heart of many of the people in the room. That's regulations. Jenny, how do we deal with these regulations? Occupational health and safety, privacy, workers' comp, the Insurance Contracts Act. How do you manage this legal and compliance layer in your experience?
The laws were there. Laws are there to protect people from people who don't have integrity and ethics. So if you operate with integrity and ethics, then you are very likely that you're going to meet the requirements of the various legislation. Having said that, with a lot of those, they can some conflict with each other. So say, for example, you've got an employer who needs to provide a safe place of work. If he doesn't know, or if he or she doesn't know about, or they don't know about a person's past medical history that might affect their performance, then they can't necessarily manage that risk. But at the same time, that person's past medical history may not actually negatively impact their performance, it might actually improve their performance. So it then comes down to the people that are quite often in the middle, which ends up quite often being people like us, where it's then about talking with the people to say, this is why it's important for this person to know this. Can we share that information? Or to someone else who's like, you don't have the right to know it, nor do you need to know it, so therefore don't ask for it. So it's usually about, what's the ultimate outcome and how do we protect our people.
Thank you, Jenny.
Can I just jump in quickly?
Absolutely.
For us, we have a situation where we have a couple of devices which are SaaS-related, collect data. We, based on some growing decision-making in sport, have that the data is owned by the individual. It's owned by the athlete. So if the individual moves somewhere, the data goes with the individual. It's not held by the team or the host organisation. And that's actually been important because of athletes feeling threatened in terms of data ending up anywhere and everywhere on PowerPoint presentations. And so for us, data integrity is paramount, and it's done through data is kept secure and it moves and is owned by the individual. And that's the end of the story for us.
Thank you, Kenneth. Gretchen, any perspectives on this in your world?
Look, I guess the main piece I'd add is how, we understand how topical this is, particularly for employers. Shared the Health on Demand research before. Our other key research piece is called the People Risk Report, and we released it late last year. And it's where we talk to half HR leads and half risk leads to get a read on how they'd rank the top 25 people risks. And last year in Australia, the number one people risk was the changing legislative environment. So there's this constant scrambling to keep up with legislation, and a lot of that ties back to the psychosocial risks legislation changes in Australia over the last few years. But yeah, there's a real challenge to keep up with it, and it leaves organisations in this place where they're trying to balance compliance with care, and they want to care for their people, but they're putting so much effort into maintaining compliance that there's almost no capacity left to focus on the care, which is a real challenge.
I like that phrase. It's good.
Oops. Should have put on Do Not Disturb. I'll wrap up with something that I know everyone's talking about, and I think every startup on the floor has AI on their banner. AI is the hot topic. As an AI leader at EY, it seems to be all that Andy and I talk about every week. But we're seeing a lot of things in this health tech space, the move toward predictive and preventative stuff that we heard about earlier today in some of the other sessions, the convergence of wearables, data, and a lot of the thinking that we've had in these startups before. But what are you seeing that you think is really impactful and innovative in your space? I'll start with you, Gretchen.
Look, the predictive piece is key for us because we're trying to mitigate risk. So anything predictive is incredibly powerful when you can see the trends in an employee population, and then you overlay the predictive analytics and start to see what that may mean in the future. You're able to make far more informed decisions and get a step ahead. I think in contrast to that, the risk is that there's a lack of AI literacy or general emerging technology literacy within the decision makers. I find that people are calling something AI where it's not AI at all. It's a very basic workflow, and people just aren't understanding. They're seeing risk where there's perhaps no risk, where it's very straightforward technology, and then they're not always seeing risk where risk does exist. So I would challenge decision makers to really improve their literacy in this space. And if you are looking at bringing on a new provider, really get yourself to the point where you can explain it in plain language. And it's only when you get to that point that you know you've got it, you really grasp what you're signing up for, and you're able to communicate that to your organisation.
Thank you. Jenny, anything to add from your perspective?
I think, obviously we're embracing AI, and in fact, one of my developers got the giggles when she heard that I was on a panel about AI, knowing that I don't do code. But I think the caution that I have is that humans are good at reading something in front of them and understanding if it's right or wrong. But we're not very good at seeing what's missing. And so you really need someone who has some subject matter expertise in the area to know the right questions to ask, but also to how to interpret the results. Are they decent results or not? But then also, what do I do with them? Because there's also the risk of differentiating between correlation and causation. Just because two things have occurred side by side, it doesn't mean that one caused the other. So you need that expert input into interpreting the results as well. So that would be my cautionary message.
Kenneth, what about you?
For me, I suppose the biggest things are around some of the ethics in terms of people using open models where data's just being flung around left, right and centre. We're very conscious that we use curated, we've got closed data sets. We're managing the reference material that the AI models are being developed. We're checking that it is a quality background information for developing, and then, as been indicated, checking the quality of the output, making sure that there is a consistent alignment between data sets. So using human experts to ensure the quality of the AI. So the AI in future is used to reduce the workload on the expert humans rather than replace it. And so that data integrity and using it to enhance the models and the impact on the individuals in the future is what we see as the key areas to focus on.
Thank you. Yeah, we see this as well. As we see the big insurers and the platform providers start to adopt AI at scale, it's that expert AI collaboration is where the magic happens. AI's superpower is its ability to troll through enormous amounts of data and to make sense of all of it. But we still need human judgment. We're not there yet with true intelligence. You were going to add something, Gretchen?
Yeah, I was thinking it really is that hybrid combination. So, and it's important to factor this in for the insurers in the room when you're looking at bringing these technologies on board, that there are humans who design the technology initially. So if it's clinical technology, clinicians will have designed it. But then there are more clinicians who need to sit behind it to apply their expert judgment, to catch the cases that the AI can't, take to completion. So it's really important that there is that nice fusion of technology and humans.
Yeah, get the AI to do the grunt work.
Yeah.
Yep.
To augment the human.
Yeah.
But I'd also add, when someone says to you, trust the science, the whole nature of science is don't trust the science. The whole nature of science is to question the science. So if you do have a provider that comes to you and says, trust the science, you should be going, burr, burr. No, I won't. I want to know what's going on behind the scenes there.
It's a good call.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we've got some time for questions. Slido is the platform that we're supposed to be using to ask questions. And there's one magically has appeared. Thank you, whoever. I was here starting to sweat that there are no questions yet. Let's see, no one specifically named, but let me just ask this question to the group. How can we get insurers and employers to work together to embrace tech solutions? Is there a tendency for each to expect the other to adopt and pay? Great question.
There's definitely a tendency to expect the other to pay. We see this day in and day out. And I think the real solution is that it's a partnership. It should be a partnership between insurer and employer in many ways. And when it comes to adopting new technologies, that's just another example of how that partnership can come to life. And it's perhaps something employers need to keep in mind when they're going to market and choosing insurers, is thinking what their appetite for innovation and really pushing the boundaries is, and find an insurer who matches that appetite.
Excellent. No more questions in yet. Give it one more minute. Does anyone want to call out a question? Speak loudly. Do it the old-fashioned way. Well, while we wait, I'll ask a question. Let's say I have an idea and I want to use a wearable like an Apple Watch and some great AI technology to help drive better exercise habits to reduce health risk. What advice would you have to me as a founder to get my startup off the ground? Anyone?
For us, it's where's the need? Where's your market? But also, can you scale it? If you can you build it for one population to get it right? But then make sure that it's scalable to increase the various populations in order to maintain viability.
Thank you, Kenneth. Anyone else?
There's a challenge in scenarios where you're building a tool like that you want employers to pay for but employees to use. And so often when innovators in this space get ready to go to market, they really focus on the payer, which is important because the payer has to pay or else you don't have a business model. But if the payer pays and the end user doesn't like it and doesn't use it and doesn't want to use the Apple Watch for your purposes when they're quite happy with the data they've been collecting and using for themselves, then in the end the business will tank. So it's really important to conduct user testing and get out there and listen to the people and consider both the payer and the user as your population.
Jenny, we've got a question for you here. Jenny, why are your customers turning to you for your expertise and technology?
Oh, you'd probably have to ask them. I think for me it's about, being open. Our actions don't necessarily mean an outcome. And I think that's a lot of, people will think, if I just do this, this and this, then I'm going to get the outcome. That's because what someone else did. But it's like when, whether you're doing any kind of change process, whether you're, coaching an injured worker to return to work, or whether you're coaching someone to develop healthier habits, it's part of that change management process. And you really need to get to the bottom of why and why now. And if you don't get to the bottom of that, I don't think you're going to be as successful. But I also find we talk about how people are motivated by moving toward pleasure or getting away from pain. I do think that aspirationally, as a founder, you think that everyone is going to move toward the pleasure, to do something that's better, faster, easier, because you think, why not? It's so much better. But just because we've got the subject matter expertise, we can't necessarily assume that they understand that and that they've gone through that same pain. So sometimes you have to paint for people the picture of inaction. So not just the picture of what benefits, but the picture of what will go wrong or what will change if you don't do anything. Because if you don't do anything, things aren't going to be the same in 5 years. Things will be worse in 5 years. And so I think it's then, and Gretchen, you probably, from a health background yourself, would have that same kind of experience where you've got to take people through that path.
Yeah, it's very powerful to be able to articulate the cost of doing nothing, because often an organisation will see it's free or we invest in this technology that you're talking about today. Where doing nothing is never free when you're talking about risk. And so it's just helping to balance that equation.
That's fantastic. Thank you both. And the floodgates of questions have now opened. That's good. Do you see the trend of adopting smart glasses in work-related injury prevention and impairment assessment? Anyone?
Rob, someone?
Smart glasses in work-related injury prevention. Is that something you see taking off?
Smart glasses as in to measure fatigue?
Impairment assessment is what the ask is, so I suppose yes.
I don't know. Does anyone else have a thought on that? I'm not sure if I'm understanding
I was going to say, if we're talking
properly.
about for fatigue, I feel like they popped up a long time ago and haven't taken off yet, which makes me hesitant to believe they're about to take off. They would have already if they were going to. And I think this probably relates to a discussion Jenny and I had earlier today about kind of movement technologies in general. So I don't know if you wanted to add a little bit to.
Yeah, with there's a lot of talk about, motion capture and wearables and things like that. And, the motion capture captures movement. It doesn't capture function. And it's quite different. Movement is, a range of motion, but it doesn't determine, like a motion capture can capture, know that the hip is bending and the knee is bending, but it doesn't know if you're squatting, kneeling, sitting, climbing a ladder. So it doesn't have that functional capacity. There's also been a bunch of research that's just come out of Waterloo University. If anyone's looking into using motion capture and wearables, I encourage you to look at that research. I can share it with you later. But it talks about how the validity of the motion capture depends on obviously the position, the angle that you're capturing it, but also to the initial data set. if your initial data set came from 20-year-olds in Korea, it's not going to be very accurate for a Kiwi, for a New Zealand player working in a warehouse. So you've got also, that's where I say challenge the science, don't trust the science, always get to the bottom of it.
I've got a techie's answer here as well. I'm just looking at the hardware, and it's getting better and cheaper really, really fast. Each generation is exponentially more powerful than the last. That's a factor. And these systems are becoming more open as well. So now it's possible to take, your Meta glasses, the Ray-Bans, and match them up with your Apple Watch. That's where it gets interesting, because I think now we have enough data points to potentially predict fatigue in real time, whereas a year ago that wasn't really technically feasible. Great question. Thank you for challenging us. What challenges are you facing when growing in sectors such as AI? Is hiring the right talent causing any issues?
Yes. As a startup, what we've done is we've actually engaged with some of the engineering faculties at universities, and we've actually worked with the students' capstone projects for our AI work initially. And that's also gives us a chance to filter and identify those students who on graduation we see have the most aptitude, understanding and interest in what we do. And we've always seen that as being important. And in fact, we've just done that. We've recruited our first employee in the AI space out of university capstone projects. So it is a way to go, and for us it's been a very cost-effective way of getting the AI working properly.
Gretchen, Jenny, any other thoughts on AI skills?
It is definitely a challenge. We see it amongst our providers, and I've seen it in previous roles I've held. But it's a constantly evolving landscape too. So I think it will become less of a challenge because that skill set is coming through in the emerging workforce. It's a challenge right now. It's not necessarily one of the most significant future challenges.
Any thoughts from you?
As a small business owner, someone who's had, I'm on my third business now. I know it doesn't matter how small or large your business is, 50% of your time will be spent with people management. I'd rather spend 50% of my time with people management, developing skills and improving skills. It's not always the case. However, saying that, I do think that skills obviously can be taught and trained, and I still recruit based on values and attitude.
Love it, as do we at EY. And I think we obviously hire a lot of people. It is a battle for talent out there, and finding people with both the hard skills and the soft skills they're rare indeed. And obviously we compete with the big banks and the big insurers in that battle for talent. And I think it's going to become a real differentiator for startups and employers in the coming years as talent gets even more scarce. With that, I think we're just bang on time here. Thank you, Jenny, Gretchen, Kenneth, for your excellent insights. And we'll hand back to our esteemed moderator.